Ever heard of a killer? I drop bombs like Hiroshima.
Somebody said, look at LeakYou video. What the fuck is LeakYou? Is it like a site? What's LeakYou? LeakYou. Is it a YouTube channel? Oh, shit. Oh, all right, bet. Here we go.
Please hit the like. Thank you.
One, two, three, four.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, you all. I have another classic for you today. We are going to be exploring Apollo 20, an EBE, extraterrestrial biological entity, Mona Lisa, who was found on the moon, the backside of the moon, within a craft in a mission that NASA says did not happen. Okay, NASA says this mission did not happen. But there seems to be evidence that it potentially did. Now, I've heard people say that this was a movie. Some of this footage you're about to see was all a movie. It wasn't real. But I also remember a very interesting interview that Linda Moulton Howe did. And forgive me, you guys may hear the washer and the dryer in the background right now. I also remember an interview that Linda Moulton Howe did. Shout out to her over at Earth Files with William Rutledge, who talked about Apollo 20 and the interaction with this organic biological entity that has been dubbed Mona Lisa. Now, I've got two clips I'm going to be showing to you. The second one, when we get to it, is going to show a lot more than what you've ever seen previously on my channel. So let's just rock with it, shall we?
John Levine and his commander, William Rutledge, in an ancient craft on the backside of the moon in Apollo 20. It had the same six-fingered embedded handprint panels. And now John Levine continues with what he and Commander Rutledge found in the 3-mile-long ancient craft on the back dark side of our moon.
So what is the discussion in detail back in 1976 between you and Commander Rutledge about this extraordinarily beautiful Polynesian-looking preserved female in one of the cockpit chairs?
Neither of us could understand how could she possibly be that well preserved.
And what is it that you're looking at first?
Her skin was all intact, and she was wearing clothing, a dress of some sort, possibly a jumpsuit type of thing. And it seemed to be very much intact, no deterioration at all to speak of.
What about those tubes on her face?
William Rutledge believed that they had to do with controlling the spaceship.
That those tubes on her face were controlling from her mind this huge 3-mile-long craft, and she was the pilot, and the gray was like a co-pilot?
Well, they had a control panel that looks like you put your hands on it. The controls that the ship's computer is directly with the pilots.
Okay, and we saw that in Roswell. The 6-fingered panels. I've talked with both scientists and military people who have confirmed for me they've had their own hands in those panels from 47. There were 6 fingers on those particular beings. What about this ancient 3-mile-long craft? How many fingers were in the panels there?
6.
There were 6. So that would match what came down in Roswell.
Yes.
Did you and William Rutledge then have discussions about those facts, and did you have information from NASA about look for 6-fingered embedded panels as control of the ship?
I received probably no briefing as I got there just in the nick of time for the flight. I'm sure Rutledge may have trained those discussions with NASA. You could guess that the ship had been there for millennia, and maybe longer.
I was going to ask you if today, have you learned from any analysis that has been done how old this big, huge 3-mile-long spacecraft, how long has it been there? How old might it be?
There have been guesses tossed around that it might be 1 million years old, might have been 100 million years old, I've even heard 1 billion years old.
And that this female was still in the pilot's chair, preserved?
Absolutely amazing, stunning.
How?
Technology beyond ours. When we took her back to the lander, Rutledge removed her jumpsuit.
Was that because you had transported her into the lander?
That's correct. And we didn't do that initially. When we returned, Rutledge said he would. He did.
So you had examined them first in the big 3-mile-long cigar-shaped ship, and then you went back and got her and brought her to the lander to bring back to the Earth as well as the Gray's head.
That's correct. Rutledge went back, remained in the lander. She had what looked like tattoos, but the reality was, or at least what Rutledge believed, when he said it made sense to me, that it was some kind of electronics that was placed on her skin.
Oh, you mean that she was a cyborg?
It's human to some extent, that's correct.
Organic and technology.
Yeah, it's like there was silver, there was copper colors mixed in with red and blue. It looked sophisticated, so I do tend to believe that she had some kind of computer attached to her skin, and they were very visible.
Were they all over her body?
No, but the thighs, portions of her sides and back, perhaps as much as 30% of her skin surface.
As much as 30% of her skin surface had these metallic-looking patterns.
Patterns, tattoos, yeah. The tattoos or patterns were probably a computer. It could be that their technology had circuits and chips that were so thin and so small that they would simply look like coloring on the skin.
Now, since you are the only firsthand eyewitness that I or anybody knows who actually has been close to and has seen this extraordinary female cyborg, perhaps, on a craft that could be anywhere from 1,000,000 to 1,000,000,000 years old and is on the moon still, but she was brought back to the Earth. What did you see with your own eyes? Patterns, dimensions.
I was an extremely well-preserved person. If they had died on the Earth, you would swear that they hadn't been dead for more than several weeks and kept fairly well-preserved during those several weeks. It was amazing.
Talk about the colors and the pattern shapes and the sizes of the pattern shapes on her body, and exactly where do you remember these patterns were?
Well, they looked like circuit patterns. They would form right angles. Several, 2-3 lines would go together, and then 2-3 lines would suddenly make a 90-degree turn. It looked computer-like. It really did.
Colors?
Blues and reds primarily.
Metallic-looking sheen or other?
Kind of a little bit of a sheen to it.
And where on her body did you see these patterns, and how big were they?
Eyes, back, and they might have been 8, 9, 10 inches wide and several feet, like 3 feet long.
the discussion in detail back in 1976 between you and Commander Rutledge about this extraordinarily beautiful Polynesian-looking preserved female in one of the cockpit chairs?
Neither of us could understand how it could possibly be that well preserved.
And what is it that you're looking at first?
Her skin was all intact, and she was wearing clothing, a dress of some sort, possibly a jumpsuit type of thing. Seemed to be very
What about those tubes on her face?
William Rutledge believed that they had to do with controlling the spaceship.
That those tubes on her face were controlling from her mind this huge 3-mile long craft, and she was the pilot, and the gray was like a co-pilot?
Well, they had a control panel that looked like you put your hands on it. And apparently the control, the computer interfaced directly with the pilot.
Okay, and we saw that in Roswell. The 6-fingered panels. I've talked with both scientists and military people who have confirmed for me they've had their own hands in those panels from 47. There were 6 fingers on those particular beings.
5 fingers with opposing thumb.
So that would match what came down in Roswell.
Yes.
Did you and William Rutledge then have discussions about those facts, and did you have information from NASA about look for 6-fingered embedded panels as control of the ship?
I received practically no briefing because I got there just in the nick of time for the flight. I'm sure Rutledge may have been trained and have had those discussions with NASA. We'd guess that the ship had been there perhaps millennia and maybe longer.
I was going to ask you if today, have you learned from any analysis that has been done how old this big, huge 3-mile long spacecraft, how long has it been there? How old might it be?
There have been guesses left around that it might be 1 million years old, might have been 100 million years old. I've even heard 1 billion years old.
And that this female was still in the pilot's chair, preserved?
Absolutely amazing, stunning.
So what is the discussion in detail back in 1976 between you and Commander Rutledge about this extraordinarily beautiful Polynesian-looking preserved female in one of the cockpit chairs?
Neither of us could understand how it could possibly be that well preserved.
And what is it that you're looking at first?
Skin was all intact, and she was wearing clothing, a dress of some sort, possibly a jumpsuit type of thing. And it seemed to be very much intact. No deterioration at all to speak of.
What about those tubes on her face?
William Rutledge believed that they had to do with controlling the spaceship.
That those tubes on her face were controlling from her mind this huge 3-mile long craft, and she was the pilot, and the gray was like a co-pilot?
Well, they had a control panel that looked like you put your hands on it. And apparently the control, the computer interfaced directly with the pilot.
Okay, and we saw that in Roswell. The 6-fingered panels. I've talked with both scientists and military people who have confirmed for me they've had their own hands in those panels from 47. There were 6 fingers on those particular beings.
5 fingers with opposing thumb.
So that would match what came down in Roswell.
Yes.
Did you and William Rutledge then have discussions about those facts, and did you have information from NASA about look for 6-fingered embedded panels as control of the ship?
I received practically no briefing because I got there just in the nick of time for the flight. I'm sure Rutledge may have been trained and have had those discussions with NASA. We'd guess that the ship had been there perhaps millennia and maybe longer.
I was going to ask you if today, have you learned from any analysis that has been done how old this big, huge 3-mile long spacecraft, how long has it been there? How old might it be?
There have been guesses left around that it might be 1 million years old. might have been 100 million years old. I've even heard billion years old.
And that this female was still in the pilot's chair, preserved?
Really amazing, stunning.
So what is the discussion in detail back in 1976 between you and Commander Rutledge about this extraordinarily beautiful Polynesian-looking preserved female in one of the cockpit chairs?
Neither of us could understand how it could possibly be that well preserved.
And what is it that you're looking at first?
Her skin was all intact, and she was wearing clothing, a dress of some sort, possibly a jumpsuit type of thing. And it seemed to be very much intact. No deterioration at all.
What about those tubes on her face?
And William Rutledge believed that they had to do with controlling the spaceship.
That those tubes on her face were controlling from her mind this huge 3-mile-long craft, and she was the pilot, and the gray was like a co-pilot?
Well, they had a control panel that looked like you put your hands on it. And apparently the controls, the computer interfaced directly with the pilot.
Okay, and we saw that in Roswell. The 6-fingered panels. I've talked with both scientists and military people who have confirmed for me they've had their own hands in those panels from 47. There were 6 fingers on those particular beings.
5 fingers with opposing thumb.
So that would match what came down in Roswell.
Yes.
Did you and William Rutledge then have discussions about those facts, and did you have information from NASA about look for 6-fingered embedded panels?
All right, guys. So listen, as we watch these images, you know, I played the snippet, very famous snippet of Linda Moulton Howe doing an interview. Okay. Give me a second. Anyway, Linda Moulton Howe doing an interview regarding what they have called the Black Mona Lisa, who was found during the Apollo 20 mission, a mission that NASA says never happened. And this being was found, and there wasn't just one, there was multiple beings found in a craft that was about 3 miles long on the backside of the moon, okay? Shout out to Emmanuel Briggs in the building this morning, been hanging out with me. So I want to talk a little bit now as we look at these images. I want to talk about something new that I want to bring to my audience, something that I've been studying for quite some time, which is a lot to take in, okay? But it's called, and it's something I brought up before, a term called transhumanism. Okay. Transhumanism. What in the heck are you talking about, Leak? What is transhumanism? Well, transhumanism is a position, an ism, that human beings would use technology to modify and or enhance not only human cognition, but bodily function, which would therefore expand one's abilities and capacities beyond any current biological constraints. Ooh-sa, that was a lot. In other words, increasing one's lifespan, enhancing cognitive and sensory abilities, the complete end of disease, the complete end of aging, and the complete end of death. The ability to achieve a super intelligence or a super longevity super happiness, as some may refer to it as, right? And some may feel this is such a new term, but it's really not. Transhumanism was actually popularized back in the 50s, about the time, right, when Earth started having all these published interactions with non-human intelligence, which seems to really lean on transhumanism. Allow me to elaborate a little more here, please. Now, if you are a fan of Linda Moulton Howe, as I am, believe me, one day when I do meet her, I will get her autograph on one of her books. Probably Glimpses of Another Reality. She has crazy illustrations in her books. I love it. But if you watched Truth Hunter, right? Season 1, season 2, mostly I'm going to be talking about season 2 here, and Tactical Tim, who I don't know how Tactical Tim has managed to stay such a mystery out here on these internet streets. Listen, I've heard some really crazy talk about Tactical Tim, things like he isn't even human. His symmetry is so perfect in his face, you know, that he isn't even human, that he was cloaking himself, with a human suit whenever he's been on television on the Gaia channel. But needless to say, Tim is a German, which is interesting in itself, okay? It is known that Nazi Germany had craft. Yes, they did. Look up Foo Fighters, World War II. It's very clear that, if you believe all the things about, the secret space, the secret space system and all of that, the biggest thing of all is that Germany kind of gave up on the world and went on to off planets like Mars and Ceres and built colonies. And that they used slave labor by taking one's consciousness and porting that consciousness. But again, back to transhumanism and why I'm talking about Truth Hunter in season 2 with Tactical Tim on Truth Hunter. Tim talked about the Greys in depth, and he talked about how he's had over 100 meetings with the Greys. The Greys, which are biological entities that are also android-like. And he went into a little bit more detail in why they're so android-like, but the Greys figured out how to eliminate the need for a biological body a long time ago. They already transcended into what we would refer to as transhumanism. They're somehow already utilizing technology for the bodies that they managed to put their consciousness into, but with all the pros that come with transhumanism, like the ability to live longer, no disease, no death. There's also cons. And Tim talked about that a little bit. He said that the Greys don't pair. They don't have like husband and wife. There's a loss of emotions when you go that route. And what route are you talking about? What I'm talking about is the ability to utilize technology to take one's consciousness out of their current vessel, human body, and put it in another cloned body, or a suit made from fibers, or a human type suit made from many small fibers, almost 3D printed, as Tactical Tim said, right? So when we hear people talking about the Mona Lisa on the moon, the black Mona Lisa on the moon, who had imprinted on her skin what looked like almost like a motherboard in a computer, and the graphics of a CPU, and a board which has all of those lines. It was those sorts of patterns were on her skin, as if her skin was being utilized as some type of computer. And there were tubes, and you will see here in a little bit, there were tubes coming out of Mona Lisa's mouth. And they believe, as you heard, that those tubes were somehow connected and were being used to pilot the ship. There is, and you even heard in the Congress hearings, right, recently, when the question came up, are these craft sentient? Are they alive? The answer is yes. There are some craft that appear to be a living being or life form of some type. The actual craft. And not only that, we've heard so much about how these beings have the ability to put their hands in a portal, or, or a hand, I'll just call it a thingamajig. And in some cases, maybe even have some sort of device that comes down and goes over the head, which may be some sort of like conductor for the brain. They have the ability to manage these craft, fly them, by using their own consciousness. Yeah, imagine that. You're not flying a plane by using the controls. You are the control. You are the control. Now, if you could take your consciousness, just think about this for a second. If you could take your consciousness and put it into a perfect cloned body that would never get disease, it won't age, it won't die, would you do it to live longer? Or would you let biology take its course? Now, unlike some philosophical positions and social movements like feminism, liberalism, communism, libertarianism, transhumanism is not really best characterized by a particular dogma, principle, or prediction. Okay? People that are transhumanists, they vary in their political doctrines, in their positions on ethical issues, and even on their religious outlooks on life. What distinguishes transhumanism as a movement or ideology is instead a set of shared core values and the conviction that those values can be pursued using technology. And even in terms of values and methods, there are differences among transhumanists. Okay? To better understand their position, you can actually distinguish 3 levels of the transhumanist culture and thought. And the first level is a set of values or beliefs that are necessary for being considered a transhumanist. The second level is a set of values and beliefs that are consistent with or sympathetic to and historically concurrent with transhumanist movements and thought. Sometimes so much so that they are seen as essential components of transhumanism, okay? But these values and beliefs are not logically implied by core transhumanist attitudes, and one may be a transhumanist without them. And the third level is a set of technologies and futurist ideas that are strongly affiliated with transhumanism. Some of these technologies embody transhumanist beliefs about the metaphysical nature of human beings, consciousness, and life. It's like a human enhancement, a human 2.0. And then one wonders, should humans be allowed, should they be permitted to use technology in an effort to modify or enhance human cognition and bodily function, or to expand their abilities and capacities beyond current biological constraints? Transhumanism, again, is characterized by those set of core values I mentioned earlier that emphasize a positive experience in recognizing the limitations of human cognition and embodiment in achieving a maximum positive experience, okay? Now, I want you to think about a billionaire. Now, there's the tubes that were in Mona Lisa's mouth. But I want you to think about a billionaire. If you were a billionaire, you had all the money in the world. And you know, technology such as this does not, is not going to be available to the everyday layman, right? But let's say someone comes and taps you on your shoulder and says, hey, we have the ability to extend your life by 500 years. As we can take your consciousness. We can put your consciousness into another cloned body, half biological, half made of fibers, but it's a vessel nonetheless. It's a vessel that will contain your consciousness. My number one question is, what happens to the soul when this transaction occurs? Because if you listen to Tim says the soul is a geometric container that holds all of our life experiences and memories, right? But it's different from the spirit or consciousness, right? Which, listen, all this is a mystery, okay? All of it is. But if you were to take one's consciousness and out of the current body and put it into another cloned body, would you do it for $100 million? And what guidelines / principles / and I do mean like universal guidelines, universal / principles, whether or not you believe in God or not, there is a positive, a negative, a black, a white, a yin and yang to everything in this universe. With everything good is something bad. With everything bad is something good. It's just how it is, right? So you know that you're going to live longer. You know that you won't get disease. But would you be okay with losing emotion, losing love, losing the sensation or feelings of pairing with a husband or wife? Then at that point, you all, hold on, y'all, Biscuits. He's upset, y'all. One sec. My apologies, folks. My dog, Biscuit, he heard somebody at the back door. He's so protective. But anyway, it kind of looks like the pilot from the movie Prometheus, right? Yes, they are. Yes. This is a type, or I should say like a topic in technology that is absolutely being worked on in science. And maybe not many are working in the study or field of transhumanism, but it's happening. So the question is, If you had enough money, would you do it? Even with the consequences of doing it, would you do it? Would the pros outweigh the cons? Because listen, I would think that one that engages in, something as serious as this, decides they want to transcend, I would think they would have to get rid of the ways of the world, the ways of earth. You know what I'm saying? So if you're a drug addict, for example, drugs should be the least of your concerns if you were going to do something like that, right? Drugs probably won't help you in a body that is cloned. You know what I mean? You get what I'm saying, right? And then you're going to be dealing with tasks, and things never stop. They always continue, no matter what, right? So how long does one want to live? And what are the disadvantages to living 500 years? Well, we know that man has lived hundreds of years if we read the Bible and if we believe in the Old Testament and what the Bible has to say. There were men that lived 800-900 years. But then God said, no more of that. Man's life will no longer extend past 120 years. In the days of Moses, right? So if we are believers, does that mean that we're going or sinning against God if we were to choose to transcend into transhumanism by using technology to extend our lives? Past 120 years? See, these are the questions that so many would have. But you can see these tubes in this being's mouth, which is different from the other being that we seen in the video. Now listen, can transhumanists survive the death of their bodies? There's a very interesting article on this, right? Because, at that point, once you transcend into transhumanism, you're a cyborg, right? And an android. Now, there's no single agreed upon definition of transhumanism, as it has become a very large and diverse movement. But transhumanism goes well beyond humanism in both means and ends. Humanism tends to rely exclusively on educational and cultural refinements to improve human nature, whereas transhumanists want to apply technology to overcome the limits that are imposed by our biological and genetic heritage. Okay? Transhumanists regard human nature not as an end in itself, not as perfect, and not as having any claim on our allegiance. Rather, it's just one point along an evolutionary pathway, and that we humans can learn to reshape our own nature in ways that we deem desirable and valuable. By thoughtfully, carefully, and yet boldly applying technology to ourselves, we can become something no longer accurately described as human. We can become post-human. I know, you just kind of have to woosah on that. You start thinking about movies like Megan and Tim, right? If nature is being used to mean innate in the sense that we have instinctual drives and appetites that are natural but can be removed or redirected or even thwarted, then there is no inconsistency. Nor is there an inconsistency if one understands human nature to apply to our human animals, and it is being assumed that we human persons are not identical to a human animal and so not bound by human nature. But some would challenge the claim that we overlap and share our bodily parts with any distinct animal, right? Where do these insane ideas come from? Who knows, right? They've been around. They've been around centuries. What's the Bible say? There's nothing new under the sun. Now, Aristotle thought we were rational human beings, and essentially, many other religious figures thought that as well. However, there is a long philosophical tradition that believes that we are just mere souls, or a composite of a soul and body. But transhumanists don't really necessarily subscribe to those ideas, right? They think, hey, we can extend this. We can make this longer. We can become a Terminator 2, right? It's just an example. Would you do it, though? Some view the body as a machine, okay? A straight up machine. And replacing that machine, that organic, mechanical body with a better machine, it's not such a bad idea, right? Or is it? Like a meat computer. You know, a meat computer. We would be a meat computer or cyborg, like I mentioned before. Would we even have to eat? Would we even require food and water at that point if we had the ability to use technology to transcend? Don't think that cyborgs require wires or metal that needs to stick out of their flesh. Have you seen how good they're getting with those robots? Could one soul, one consciousness, be used in multiple vessel bodies? And the question then comes up, well, if we start getting into porting human souls, I think it'll create a criminal faction eventually. Because then people are going to start trying to steal folks' souls. Wouldn't that be the ultimate? You really think about it? The absolute ultimate, even more than money, that would mean more than money, is one's soul. Instead of enslaving human beings in their, physical bodies, they would start enslaving the human soul. And if you could break the soul out into multiple pieces, you could have 2 or 3 different beings based on just that one soul. Listen, I know a lot of this goes over a lot of y'all's heads. Not everybody, but a lot. Because some people, when they think about this type of stuff, they're thinking of Terminator, that sort of a thing. A robot that looks, really human, but is the possibility of transitioning, is the possibility of transitioning a real possibility. Well, 20, 30 years ago, we were talking about AI, weren't we? And it didn't even exist. The concept didn't even exist to human beings. Now, I know this because I've been in technology. I specialize in technology, right? AI did not exist 30 years ago the way it exists now. It is just blown over. You know, people talking to computers and asking questions like Alexa and Siri, right? Hey Siri, what's the weather for today? Hey Siri, what's the weather for today? She tells me it's going to be sunny all day. Hey Siri, what's 3 plus 3 minus 6 times 10 divided by 4 times 2? Negative 24. Oh, nope. She says negative 48. And I was just throwing numbers out there, right? But the possibility of AI just being on our phones and on devices with Alexa and, you know, and other AI technology that will form, and somehow merging that with the human body to eradicate aging, to eradicate death, is going to come the question of, should we? Even if we can, should we use technology to augment our bodies and our minds? This is not a new, again, this is not a new concept. In the past, you've heard of devices like wooden legs, hearing aids, spectacles, false teeth. In the future, we may just use implants to augment our senses so that we can detect infrared or ultraviolet radiation. We would maybe put a chip in that would directly boost our cognitive processes, right? Or maybe we want to connect ourselves to a chip so that we can just think. Send an email and it sends. Without having to voice it out of our mouth, we just think it and it happens. Merging man and machine. What will that first being be called? And then you got to think about those that will start calling themselves gods, right? I created this increased intelligence and strength. I'm a god, right? Ego, in other words. But listen, there are many, 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 many people that are advocates for transhumanism, and they believe that there are spectacular rewards that we can reap from going beyond our natural barriers and limitations that constitute an ordinary human being. Now, again, we know that doing this would raise a host of ethical problems and dilemmas, but is it enough to stop anybody? Will it be ethical to allow surgeons to replace someone's limbs with a carbon fiber blade just so that they can win a gold medal? Would that cause other athletes to seek such surgery? And you all, is it true? I'm asking if it's true, if anybody may know this out there who's listening. Is it true that there's some sort of tax break of some kind that the IRS has been giving people that identify as something else? I seen something earlier today, and you know, I'm thinking transhumanism. I'm thinking about people that identify as, you know, other things like cats. There are people that identify as cats. All right, cats, kangaroos, socks, whatever, right? Is it really true? Like, and then what would be like some of the financial pieces of really transcending into transhumanism and somehow merging technology with the body to where we don't age anymore, we don't have death anymore? My God, we'd have to pay a lot more taxes, right? If we were living longer. We know that it would be super expensive. Only the rich would be able to afford such a, quote, luxury. But we've got electronic devices being implanted into the body now. And what happens when an electronic device fails? Many believe that modern technology will ultimately offer humans the chance to live for eons, unshackled, okay? Unshackled pretty much to the biological experience and the frail, you know, the frail human body, our organs failing. Instead of, you know, our hearts and livers and lungs failing, they'd be replaced by longer lasting high-tech versions that could be maybe upgraded at a later time. You know, I'm going to upgrade my heart to the 2.5 version. What happens to the soul at that point? When human beings get into merging technology in an effort to extend our life, what happens to the soul? There are bodies currently being stored in the United States in cryogenic facilities, not just the United States, around the world, intentionally preserved until medical science has reached a stage where they can be revived and their resurrected bodies augmented and enhanced. I am of the opinion that the body is a vessel. And once our soul / consciousness leaves that vessel for good, when that silver cord is broken, there's no going back. That's my opinion, right? But science may say different. What happens to that thing called the soul? Would you do it? Imagine artificial limbs, bionic limbs, right? Artificial legs and arms, right? That could be 10 million times better than what, you know, prostheses that we currently see out there, right? Being able to enhance the senses, being able to see light in a different way, ultraviolet light through the human eye, of course, infrared light. How could we extend the wavelengths of radiation that we detect that would allow us to see more of the world potentially in a different light? What about a powered exoskeleton suit that would allow people to move their limbs with increased strength and endurance? I'll go climb Mount Everest without a Sherpa. Transhumanists envy the day when memory chips and neural pathways will actually be embedded into people's brains. Why would that be important? Well, the day that happens, you could then bypass the need to use an external device, such as a computer, in order to access data, to make like complicated calculations, because you could just do it literally in your head at that point. And no question, with this will become some very, very much so blurred lines, folks. Okay, very, very much so blurred lines. And let me ask you, would you do it? If you had the money. And you know you could live forever, 1,000 years. Would you do it? Now, the other thing to consider here, folks, is robots and the advancement of robots and putting robots on the front line of confrontations and war. Now, this is something I've also talked about before, and I think it's something that is very, very, very likely to happen. Why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we, as robots get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, why wouldn't we put a robot on the front line in a war situation? You can't kill it. It would be hard to kill it, right? There's disadvantages and advantages, right? In other words, when I say hard to kill it, shooting it, you know. And imagine the loads of ammunition a robot could get off in a frontline type situation. Programming and controlling those robots would be humans. And are telling these robots to do this, do that. It's very possible that if we put a robot in a frontline war type situation, that the human being could be literally looking through the eyes of this robot on whatever device they may be connected to the robot with. These things are not unlikely. They are more likely to happen in the next few lifetimes. Who would have thought that in my lifetime, I would even see the things that I've seen, right? I think we all can say that. But transhumanism, if you're not familiar, get familiar with it. Get familiar with it. I bet you 9 out of 10 people would do it if they had the money, especially big billionaires who have the money to do it, right? Somebody taps them on the shoulder and says, hey, we have a technology. You can live longer, make more money. We can even take AI and merge it with your intelligence. Elon Musk has even said he wants humans to merge with AI. He wants to achieve a symbiosis with artificial intelligence. And here we are, back in the 70s and 80s talking about artificial intelligence on ships and craft that we didn't think even would ever exist. It was just a science fiction thought. But yet here we are. Artificial General Intelligence, AGI. Companies like OpenAI, DeepMind, and Anthropic are racing towards the development of AGI, even though some experts have warned that it could lead to literal human extinction. Now, the perils are maybe a little bit overstated, but these companies have a lot to gain in this area. And if they could engineer a device or a technology that could create this so-called utopia, why not, right? There's more to come, I'm telling you, when it comes to this topic overall. Listen, guys, I appreciate each and every one of you for coming through. Maybe I should do some sort of like weekly space on Twitter X. I don't know why I call it Twitter X, but you know, I think if I held a space, I could probably get people to come to it, and because I'd love to know other people's thoughts on a lot of these things that I talk about, especially the topic around transhumanism. Because ultimately, I think that EBE Mona Lisa, who, um, was found in that 3 mile long craft on the backside of the moon in the mission that supposedly never happened, Apollo 20, I think that was transhumanism slapping us right there in our faces. Again, you heard the commander talk about how the skin, it looked like it had like a processor in it, the way that a motherboard looks in a computer. But I digress. Listen, folks, before I get up out of here, allow me to pay a few bills if you don't mind. Shout out to the LeakYou community. Please join us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Amazon Music.
Please hit the like. Thank you.
All right, guys, my apologies there. I was just got a little sidetracked there. Anyway, shout out to each and every one of you. I appreciate you all for coming through. Make sure you subscribe to my channels on all platforms. Pretty much just search LeakYou, in whatever search bar you want. I'm everywhere. But my X/Twitter platform has been really growing in the last year or so. And I've been really focusing pretty hard on Twitter X more than any other platform, I think. And Rumble, I've kind of transitioned over to Rumble from YouTube. I'm really trying to get off of YouTube. I just feel like there's so much censorship happening between Facebook and YouTube, and shadow banning is real. And I can't begin to tell you how many times I've been shadow banned just from talking about things in this arena. Aliens, UFOs, UAPs, things like that. I will never forget. Well, it doesn't matter the individual incidents, but like Skinny Bob, I remember having so many problems showing that Skinny Bob clip that that leaked out. That's owned by nobody. It's definitely owned in the public domain, right? But these crazy, weird copyright takedowns that mysteriously just disappear, and or videos just disappearing with no reason, and or videos being struck down with just weird reasoning. Oh, it's spam, it's this. Even recently, when I did a video on Immaculate Constellation, when it first, came out that this was a real thing, I had my video taken down on 2 platforms. And then you also, and I did a video and showed you all the evidence of this, of how Google has literally went in and has scrubbed their data to remove any data related to the term of Immaculate Constellation. Before it blew up in early October, you could actually search Immaculate Constellation on search trends. And there was actually a time when the first hearings in Congress happened where there was a spike in the search of that particular program. Now you go and look, Google has removed that information. So don't think that our government doesn't have ways, means, and methods to remove things altogether from the internet. There is a big piece on Biden's administration interfering with social media platforms and companies to have them remove content that was not COVID vaccination friendly, okay? And I happen to be one of the people that was affected by that. And it wasn't just, oh, we're going to take the video down. Oh, no. Biden wanted to punish us. Those that had their videos swiped because of that COVID, being against these vaccinations that seem to be, in some cases or reports, you're likely to die 4,000 more times just from getting the vaccination than from COVID. Okay? Again, I've always said, how in the heck did they develop it so fast? I mean, we still got Ebola out here. We've still got HIV. Never seen any organization be able to produce a vaccination so quickly. Then you start forcing it on the American population, and then you start telling people, well, you can't even come to work if you haven't gotten vaccinated. Well, I proudly have never been vaccinated against the COVID, okay? Proudly. I would never allow those chemicals to come into my body like that. And my opinion, also is very much of that. And my opinion got my videos taken down and got me a 7-day takedown on the Google platform. Again, there's a big, huge article. Let me see if I can find it really quick. COVID, Biden, social media. I'll never forget that. And it was in 2020 when it happened. It was in 2020 when they did that. But yeah, Biden even pressured Mark Zuckerberg to censor COVID content, right? He actually Mark Zuckerberg regretted having to cave into government pressure. That's a real thing. Google did cave, right? But Biden, let me just read the article real quick. So Facebook/Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg has accused United States President Joe Biden's administration of pressuring his team to censor content on the COVID-19 pandemic in a letter that Republicans have latched onto as alleged evidence of the administration cracking down on free speech. Zuckerberg said it was wrong of the government to pressure social media platforms. He said he regretted buckling to the pressure. The testimony from one of the world's most influential tech titans comes amid a heated presidential election campaign, which we know Trump has won that campaign, right? But Republicans have long accused social media platforms of censoring them. And I'm telling you, not only did Zuckerberg's comments fuel those accusations and assertions, but I'm here to tell you personally, it absolutely happened to me. It absolutely happened to me. And there were people that lost their platforms. There were people that were demonetized because of that. Just like you've got this TikTok ban happening pretty soon. And there's going to be a lot of people that are going to lose a lot of money when that happens. And our government does not care. Zuckerberg said that he felt the government pressure was wrong and that he regretted that they were not more outspoken about it. Well, these are the things he admitted that are most important as I close down. That the Biden-Harris administration pressured Facebook to censor Americans, just period, when it came to the COVID-19. Like, you can't have people out here saying not to get vaccinated, right? Facebook censored Americans, right? And that Facebook also throttled the Hunter Biden laptop story. What does throttling mean? Throttling means controlling the connection, for example, to a page, right? To a web page. And if you're throttling that connection, that would mean that some people may be able to get in, but most times can't. They can't. They won't be able to read the page. All right. They're throttling it. Just depends on what you're doing when you decide to throttle. Okay. But Biden had claimed social media platforms were killing people with COVID-19 misinformation. Now, he rescinded that statement. But this weird policy that Biden did, he was for, and it wasn't just Facebook. They did it with Google, okay? Basically taking down posts, taking down videos that claimed COVID-19 was either man-made, was a man-made virus, that it was manufactured, or that it leaked from a lab in Wuhan, China. I think the lab leak story is absolutely 100% correct. I mean, we've got our own department, our Defense Department, essentially, our FBI, who's even had classified reports speak on how this virus was most likely the result of a lab leak. Wuhan, China has a level 4 biolab, one of very few in the world. Any content that suggested vaccines were not safe was pulled, was also targeted. Thus, my content was absolutely targeted. And I received, not only was my content removed, but I also received like a punishment for publishing it. Now, Facebook has admitted that over 20 million posts were removed from Facebook and Instagram between the beginning of the pandemic and the summer of 2021. It also added warning labels on 190 million posts. But I'm telling you, you could not, in 2020, going into 2021, have an opinion about COVID-19 and it be against the governments, because they were having those pulled, like I said. And if you were depending on sorry guys, I got sidetracked here. Anyway, y'all, let me get up off of here because I'll be talking and talking. I appreciate you all. I'm out of here. I'll catch you all on the next live stream again. Pay attention to my Twitter. I may open up a space or two in the near future. Until next time, everyone.
The judgment sentence that you are an asshole. The trial is over. Thank you, everybody.
Let's play a game. You have 10 seconds to take all your stuff and get out of my life. 10, 9, 8.
God bless you, motherfucker.
You're really smart. Like really, really, really smart like I am.